Alright, in this video, we're going to look at part 2 of sliding and shuffling stuff around in KLWP. If you have not watched part 1, please do so before watching this one because we're going to pick right up from where we left off. And in part 1 of the video over here, if we tap this red square, we accomplished being able to slide it to the middle and having it come down to the dead center of the screen and then scaling out. We can tap on this green square and it will move the red back, and notice the green's pretty much doing the same thing. So we can alternate between these two, and then what we can also do at any given point in time is we can tap this green square or the red one for that matter, and we can have them go back to like the default setup if you want to call it like something like that. Now what we want to do for this part of the tutorial is to take something like this. If I take this red one and I tap it, maybe I want the green to slide over a little bit, maybe give it a little bit of room to animate over, maybe prevent some of that overlap, because as you can see the red and the green do kind of overlap each other. Actually the green's layered on top, so you can see the red one behind the green. But maybe we want to move these two squares as one square is animating to the center of the screen. Let's go into KLWP and have a look. So inside of KLWP, we're going to pick right up from where we left off. We have all these overlap groups with squares in it, and remember I called them TL for top left, TR for top right, etc. So if I tap on this red one here, I want this green one to slide over some to prevent a little bit of that overlap, to give it a little bit of room, to give that red one a little bit of room to move in and animate. Well, how can we accomplish this? What we want to happen is we want this green one here to animate when the red one gets activated. Now notice down here at the bottom right now my text global variable go is set to open. When I tap on this one, it's going to be set to TL. So when the global variable go becomes TL, I want this green one to do something as well. I want it to slide to the right a little bit and then maybe come right back after it's slid over to the right. How do we do that? Well, let's go to TR. That's our top right. This is the one we want to animate. I'm going to go to animation and I'm going to add a new complex animation based on a formula. So for our formula, what do we want to happen here? Well, when the global variable go, that text global, is equal to TL, I want this thing to animate. So let's type that formula in. If GVGo is equal to TL, we want to animate forward. Otherwise, we want to animate back. Just like that. So now we are actually going to animate the top right square when our GVGo is equal to TL. That may be a little bit confusing, but notice what I want to happen is when I'm equal to TL, I want that green square to animate. And you may have just noticed that it slid off the screen. Well, let's apply a complex animation to this. Alright, so now at this point for our complex animation, go to our animator, and what do we want this thing to do? Well, I want it to slide to the right and then I want it to slide right back. Well, what we can do is we can just apply, I think, 2 pieces to our animator here, and I think we can accomplish this. Let's go ahead and add one. And at 50%, so halfway through the animation, I want the X offset to be, since I want it to go to the right, and remember we're dealing with 300 by 300 squares. I discussed all of that in part 1. Let's suppose, okay, I want it to go to the right. How about 150? Let's see what happens there. But then what I want to happen as well is I want it to come right back when it finishes the animation. 100%, I want the X offset to be 0. Let's see what happens with that. All right, so tapping this, let's see if it's going to move the green one. Check that out. See that? So what that's doing is whenever this thing is equal, whenever the text global variable go becomes TL, I want it to slide to the right 150 pixels. Halfway through the animation, let's look at this narrator or the animator again. So sliding to the right 150 pixels, then I want it to come right back to where it originally was. X offset 0 is going to put it back at its original position. So as you can see, what we're accomplishing here is the following. When it becomes TL, notice it slides out of the way, but then it pops right back. So it's like it's getting out of the way as the red one comes in or as the red one comes back, because that's how that formula is taking care of this. It's animating forward and it's animating back. Well, good news. What we can do now is we can take this same exact complex animation. I'm going to copy that, and I want the same thing to happen to the red one when I animate the green one in. So I'm going to go to my top left, I'm going to go to its animation, and I'm going to paste that same animation we just did. We have to fix a few things inside of this. I'm going to go to the code, and now since I'm in my top left, I want to animate this top left when my global variable go, my text global, is equal to TR. One more thing we need to fix. If I want the same type of animation to go on, I need to come into the animator and I need to change the X offset to -150. This is going to slide it to the left. Now, something to note here about my 150. Why am I using 150? Well, 150 is half of 300, so technically what we're doing here is we're sliding both of these squares to where it's like half of it's going off the screen and the other half is remaining on the screen. Should you want to animate it completely off the screen and bring it back, you would want to use 300s here, or whatever size of the shape that you are animating there. I hope that makes sense. So, I mean, 150 and -150, those are just some really some arbitrary values. You can use whatever you want there. So let's have a look at this. So when I press the green one, notice the red one slid out of the way. And if I close it back, notice it's still going to happen. So that red one is getting out of the way as the green one comes in or as it comes back. Same thing's going to happen with this one now. So just like that, you know, we have a kind of a cool look going on here. We have some things interacting with each other. That's what it appears to be, at least. And then notice if we come and do this and we bring this one in. And now this is what I mentioned back in part one. In part one, sometimes you're going to let the animations take care of themselves. Now the reason why this doesn't look like what you think it should look like is because two things are really going on here. When I do this, the red square slides to the left because it's animating back and it's reversing that animation we just created in this tutorial. In part one, you know, it's kind of crazy, but I'm going to try my best to explain this to you. When I do this and it's animating out, that's what we did in part one. If I switch over to this one, there's a couple of things going on here. The text global variable is no longer going to be TL, it's going to be TR. So really, these two complex animations are kind of working at the same time, because this first one we made in the first video, that's going to react when the global variable go is equal to TR. This one's going to react as well when the global variable go is equal to TR, because it's changing from a TL to a TR. That's the one we just created. This one was from part one. That's crazy, I know. But in part one, I did mention sometimes you're going to let the complex animations take care of themselves. So notice it's not going all the way to the left. It's kind of crazy what it's doing here, but I mean, it's still got a nice effect to it. Whereas if I close this out like that, that's when that red one's going to go to the left, and then the same thing is going to happen here. I can make that green one go to the right. So, you know, you got a whole different effect between these two depending on how you navigate between these two menus. I hope you like that effect. It's not that bad. The only thing I don't like about it, I guess, is that the green one, based on the way I have them layered, the green one is always going to be on top of the red one. Notice if I do this here, the green is slightly above that red there. So if you like that, let's go ahead and move on to part two, or part two of part two, I guess. I want to talk about the middle piece. You know, these greens and these reds, the middle pieces are blocking it, right? Well, how do we want to handle this? The options are endless. All right, what we're going to do here is the following. Whenever we have one of these greens or one of these reds activated, what we're going to do here is we're going to take these two pieces. It's going to be a little bit different than the preview I gave you back in part one. I'm going to take these two things and I want to slide them up and I want to scale them down a little bit. So let's talk about how we can handle that. I want to back out of here. I'm going to go to my center left and my center right. I'm going to come to my center left first. So this is this purple one, the center left. Under its animation, I'm going to add a complex animation reacting on a formula. All right, so for this formula, what do we want to happen to this? Let's make sure we're on the same page here. What do we want to happen to this thing? I want this thing to go up whenever my green one or my red one is activated. So basically either one of these, I want it to go up and basically get out of the way. But I also want it to scale down, and that's going to make a little bit more sense right here in a minute. So let's talk about that. We're going to move this thing up. I'm still going to use a complex animation, but I want it to move up regardless whether it's the green or the red. So how do we accomplish that? If GVGo is equal to top left or GVGo is equal to top right. I want to animate this thing forward, otherwise I want to animate it back. So this is going to slide it up eventually whenever I have either one of these text global variable values, TL or TR. So it's going to slide it up. Now I'm still going to use a complex animation here to keep everything in sync with the same durations. Now I haven't applied a number global variable for my duration. I'm keeping all of them set to 10. You could easily go back in, create a number global variable, apply it to this duration. I've mentioned that in many of my tutorials. But here I'm just going to stick with 10 just to kind of speed up this tutorial and this series that we're doing here. So for our action, let's go to complex animation. And for the animator, let's just go ahead and set this at 100%. Now really we could just do a scroll here, but I'm going to go ahead and use my complex animation. The Y offset. How far do I want this thing to slide up? Well, that purple one is in the middle of the screen. I want it to slide up all the way to the top. We're not going to worry about the scale thing yet. So we have to do a little bit of math yet again. In part 1, I did mention the height of the screen was 1280. And then the square that we're moving is 300. So we're going to take 1280. We're going to subtract 300. That gives you 980, but that's the height of my screen. My screen is 1280. If I divide that by 2, I get 490. Now I want my Y offset to be a negative 490. Let's apply just this one and see what happens. So what should happen to this thing here? The Y offset, it should move it all the way up here to the top left corner whenever my text global variable go is equal to TL or TR. Let's see what happens. You see how that one moved right up to the top left-hand corner? And it's going to stay there if I activate this one. But now it's blocking it, right? So we got something weird going on here. Well, we're going to fix that. But notice I can go back and forth between the red one or the green one. Now, can I press the red here? Yes, I can. So I'm activating TL or TR, but this thing is staying put. The only time it's going to go back is when my text global variable go is not equal to TL and it's not equal to TR. A little bit confusing, but ands and ors, I know it's crazy. But if I close this red one out, notice my text global variable go is no longer equal to TL, nor is it equal to TR. That's why it's moving it back. What else do we want to happen? I want this thing to scale down a little bit. The reason why I want it to scale down a little bit is because eventually this blue one is going to be doing the same thing, and I'm going to do something with this green one too to kind of round out this part 2 of this tutorial. So I want this thing to scale as well, and to make it easy on myself, I'm going to go to my complex animation, not there, I'm going to go to the animator, and I'm just going to add another 100%. You can adjust these percentages all you want. And I'm going to change the scale XY, and I want it to scale to half of its size. So that's going to be 0.5. So basically we're going to have two things going on in this complex animation. It's going to move up and it's going to become half of its original size. This is going to make this purple piece a little bit smaller. Check that out. Now look what it did there. I love the way that looks because now it's no longer in the top left-hand corner. Technically it is, but since it's half its size, you have to imagine the original size of that square would be filling in the top left-hand corner of this thing. So I like the way that looks. Now let's apply this same complex animation to our blue one. That's what's lovely about this. We can copy and paste if we want to make the same animation for our other one. So taking the center left, this one right here, I'm going to take that complex animation, copy, and I'm going to paste it into the center right. And we don't have to change a daggone thing about this one because we want it to move up as well. If you want to get more creative and maybe move one up and move one down, then you would need to change the sign of your Y offset. But for the sake of this one, I'm just going to move it straight up as well. So let's just save this. Let's go back to the home screen. Let's see what we got going on here. All right, let me close that out. So this is our default setup for right now. Text global variable go is set to open. If I tap this one or this one, both of these should move up. Check it out. And they're going to stay there as long as my text global variable, remember that code, if GVGO is equal to TL or GVGO is equal to TR, we want to move both of these up because I just copied and pasted. And the only time they're going to do that is when that text global variable go is not equal to TL, nor is it equal to TR. And as you can see now, it is equal to open. So now one more thing to fix to round all this out. What do I want to happen here? So we got to fix one more thing here. When this happens, when we open this red one, when we're equal to TL, I want this green one to do something else. What I want it to do now is I want it to animate. It's going to the left, it's coming back, but I want it to come right back here to the center so that this green one will be the same size as these, and I want it to be in the middle of this screen right here. That's going to be a real cool effect. It's going to be very similar to what I did in the part 1 when I gave you a big preview of all this stuff. So we're going to go back in here and we're going to change the way we had this green one animating based on when we activate this red one here. Again, TL and TR. So I'm going to go into KLWP and we're going to make some tweaks to the complex animation. So TR, let's reset everything back to normal. So I want this TR, this top right one, I want it to, again, it's still going to slide right and it's going to come back. But what I want it to do now, when it comes back, I want it to come back a little bit further than its original position. Because I want it to come back to the center, and I also want it to scale to where it's going to be the same size of these when we had this red one out here. Well, let's go and see how we can do that. Top right, I'm going to go to its animation, and I'm going to edit this same complex animation that we just created back at the beginning of this video. And the only thing I really got to change here are 2 parts. At 100%, I don't want it to go back to its original position. I actually want it to go to the center of the screen. Last week we talked about this magic number here. The width of our screen was 720. I'm subtracting the 300 because that's the size of my square. I did all these calculations last week. And then we divide it by 2, so we want to go to 210. I want my X offset to be negative 210 because I want it to slide back to the left as it completes 100% of this animation. One more thing I want it to do, I want it to become half of its original size. One way we can do that is we can go 100%, we can set the scale XY, and we can set this to 0.5. Now we can do some tweaking here with this, but watch what's going to happen here. When I activate the TL, when this becomes TL, it's going to slide to the right, but it's going to start scaling immediately. Maybe you don't like that. I'll show you how to fix that real quick. So let me activate it. Notice it's scaling, and check it out. It is in the center. It's the same size of these other ones because I'm scaling them all the same. And if I close this back out, you know, we do have some unique interacting effects going on here. Maybe you don't want it to scale right at the very beginning. Well, I mentioned this last week on ways you can keep it from scaling too soon. Maybe at 50%, I don't want it to be scaled yet. Because notice, let me show you this one more time. If I press this, that green one's scaling immediately as it starts to move. Well, maybe we don't want it to scale until after it's slidden over to the right. Well, how do we fix that? I'm going to go to my 50% mark, and I'm going to add, let me change that to 50, and I'm going to change the scale XY here. I'm going to set it to 1. Now what that's going to do for the first half of the animation, since scale XY is set to 1, it's not going to scale for the first half of its animation. This is going to be a different effect here. Now when this green slides over, it's going to stay the same size, but as it starts coming back to the center, that's when you're going to see the scale. Check this out. You see how it stayed the same for the first half? Watch this one more time. It slides to the right. It stays the same size because scale XY is set to 1. But then when it comes to the center, that's when it's going to start scaling to half of its original size. So check this out one more time. It stays the same. Then it starts to scale for that last half of the animation. Pretty cool, huh? And now, before I show you where things get real cool, because I'm not talking about how these are interacting yet, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to copy that yet again. Well, actually, let's not copy it. Let's just come into our red one because I want the same thing to happen to the red. So if I activate my green one here, I want this thing to slide left and I want it to come to the center. This red one, I want it to come to the center and scale down. Well, since we already kind of have a good chunk of that done, I'm going to go to my TL. I'm going to edit that complex animation we did earlier, and I'm going to come to its animator. And what we want to do here for the 100% animation, I want it to go to a positive 210 because I want it to slide to the right to the center. And I'm basically going to do those same scale XYs. So at 100%, scale XY, 0.5, And then also the way we did it, you don't have to follow this exact technique, but I didn't want it to scale until after it slid to the left. So I need to add a 50% mark. And I want the scale to be set to 1 there. That way it's not going to scale until we hit the 50 to 100% mark. Now, I know that's a lot going on there. Let me just go ahead and reset everything back. Let's save this. Let's go to the home screen and check out what we really have going on here. So I'm clicking on my red. Got a whole bunch of stuff going on. If I close my red out, notice everything's going back to default. But this is where it gets kind of interesting. The green and the red, the way they interact with each other. Check this out. If I tap on the green and the red, they interact uniquely, in my opinion. You know, the red one's going to the left, and then the green one kind of goes to the right a little bit. And you can tweak this even more by adjusting your offsets to different amounts, maybe making them higher offsets. That would make them slide over a little bit further. But I didn't really talk anything in this video about, you know, what happens as we do this. The complex animations are kind of taking care of themselves, and I think it gives it a nice effect. What we have not talked about in this video is what happens when we tap on these two. Like if I tap on this blue one and it comes front and center, what do we want all these other squares to do? There's a lot going on here, but I think this is plenty to go over in part 2 of this tutorial. We're still only have touches applied to these two squares, but yet we already have these squares interacting. In part 3, we'll talk about touching these two, getting these to interact with that, and then maybe finally we'll tie in the blue and the yellow down here to get them to interact with these squares as well. And there you have it. That's part 2 of sliding and shuffling stuff in KLWP. And that's it for this video. I hope it helped.